The mansion stood like a silent monument to wealth and grief, its towering pillars rising into the early evening sky, lights glowing cold and sterile behind frosted glass. Everything about the estate exuded order. Sharp lines, pristine marble floors, polished silver fixtures. But underneath the glossy surface lingered an air of suffocating stillness, as if laughter and warmth had once lived here but fled long ago. The walls seemed to breathe a faint sorrow, the type that only a home built on both love and loss can hold in its bones. Amina walked through the grand foyer with slow, respectful steps, her shoes soft on the marble. She held her bag gently against her uniform, posture graceful, composed, as though she was careful not to disturb the silence that wrapped around the place. Her eyes carried kindness like a quiet light. Despite her exhaustion from a long night shift at the nursing home and another day ahead here, she did not show bitterness or complaint. She had learned very young that the world rarely rewarded noise from those who served. Instead, it punished it. So she moved like a calm river, quiet and steady, carrying far more strength than she ever boasted. In her arms, the billionaire's twins, Noah and Naomi, rested their sleepy heads upon her shoulders. The little girl clung to Amina's braid while her brother held onto her collar, as though she were an anchor in a world that confused and frightened them. Their small fingers gripped her with trust, and she held them with tenderness, humming a soft tune under her breath. It wasn't a nursery rhyme from storybooks, but a lullaby from home, gentle, slow, sung in a language these children did not understand. Yet somehow it soothed them more than any expensive toy or high-tech sound machine ever had, the house staff whispered when Amina passed. Not because they disapproved, most admired her, but because they wondered. How did someone so gentle step inside a place so cold and manage to warm the very air around her? Even the twins' grandmother, when she visited, had once murmured after watching Amina cradle them, "God sends healers into this world in forms we often overlook." And yet, while Amina walked through hallways full of portraits of smiling people she had never met, a camera quietly tracked her movement. Inside his office upstairs, surrounded by dark wood and untouched bookshelves full of titles he once cared about, sat Ethan Hale, billionaire, young widower, father, a man buried not under business deals or board meetings, but under regret so heavy it bent his shoulders more than age ever could. His face on the monitor was unreadable, handsome, controlled, carved in ice, eyes sharp yet lifeless. He watched Amina through the security feed, not because he distrusted her, but because he trusted no one anymore. The soft hum of the computer and the faint ticking of the large clock behind him were the only sounds filling the office. There were days he forgot he could speak because silence had become his language. His gaze stayed locked on Amina and the twins, and something flickered, an emotion he quickly crushed beneath logic and habit. She kissed the top of Naomi's head, patting her gently, whispering something about angels and peace. Ethan's jaw tightened, and a pain flashed in his eyes so fast it could be mistaken for anger. The way she mothered them, it stirred memories. His wife laughing, her hands brushing dust off tiny clothes she bought months before the twins were born, her voice promising they would be the happiest family. Her breath leaving her body too soon, in a hospital room where Ethan stood helpless and shattered, unable to bargain with fate despite all his wealth. The soft music playing from the nursery camera drifted into his office, a piano tune the late Mrs. Hale used to play before bed. Ethan froze, every muscle tense. The sound was too familiar, too haunting, like a ghost running her fingers across old wounds. He closed the feed abruptly, as though turning off the image would silence the ache in his chest. Downstairs, Amina never saw the screen go dark. She was too busy wiping a tiny tear from Noah's cheek and whispering that everything was all right. And in that moment the mansion shifted. Not noticeably, not enough for most to feel, but the atmosphere changed ever so slightly. For the first time in a long time, a hint of warmth, small and fragile, like the flame of a match, glimmered quietly within those cold walls, unaware of the storms, heartbreak, and impossible choices that soon would fall upon everyone living inside. In the house of silence, a single heartbeat of tenderness had been planted, and fate had already begun turning its wheels. Night settled over the city like a velvet curtain, and the Hale mansion, still vast and beautiful, felt smaller in the hush that followed the twins' soft breathing. Amina tucked them into their crib, smoothing blankets around tiny chests and brushing curls from innocent foreheads. Their eyelids fluttered in peaceful sleep, and for a moment she allowed herself to watch them, her lips curving in a tender smile. Children had a way of softening even the hardest days. Their existence made her feel needed, seen, valued, emotions she rarely received in the world outside these walls. But once their room fell silent and she stepped out into the hallway, exhaustion crept back into her bones like a shadow reclaiming ground. She pressed her hand against the wall for balance, drawing in a breath and steadying herself. The double shifts, the late-night nursing homework, the early mornings here, and the constant emotional labor of caring for two toddlers who clung to her like lifelines. It all wore on her, yet she never complained. Complaints didn't heal wounds. They only made them louder, and the world already had enough noise. She had learned to carry her burdens quietly, like many women in her shoes did, with dignity. Amina found a brief moment alone in the staff kitchen. She poured herself a cup of warm water. Not tea, not coffee, just warmth, because sometimes warmth alone was a comfort. The staff passed by, offering gentle smiles but not conversations. They respected her but didn't entirely understand her. To them, she was a mystery, a woman who worked harder than any of them, yet who moved with peace instead of resentment. She slid her phone out of her pocket and saw a message light up the screen. "Marcus, you done yet, beautiful? I miss you." Her heart fluttered despite herself. Marcus, charming, smooth-talking, with a smile that once made her think love still existed for people like her, had found a place in her lonely spaces. She texted back slowly, thumb hovering over the screen, as if she weighed every letter. "Almost done. The twins are sleeping now." Seconds later, the reply came. "Marcus, good, tonight's ours. I want to hold you. I want to take care of you for once." The words hit her like warmth, spreading through cold fingers. "Take care of you for once." She almost laughed, bitter, tired. He didn't know the weight of her days. The money she sent home for her grandmother's dialysis, her fear of failure, her quiet battles to maintain composure when fatigue pressed against her like a boulder. But still she wanted to believe. Belief was a fragile hope she clung to in the quiet hours. She whispered to herself, "Maybe I deserve softness too." It sounded like a prayer, not for romance, but for the idea that even those who serve, who sacrifice, who are always strong, could one day lean instead of holding everyone else up. She went upstairs again to check the twins. They stirred lightly, one of them murmuring in his sleep. She adjusted their blankets, her fingers brushing their tiny hands. Children always reminded her of life's purity, before the world became loud with judgment, racism, assumptions, and class walls that separated who society adored and who it tolerated. She didn't know Ethan was watching again, not from a screen this time, but from the slightly ajar office door, quiet in the darkness. He caught sight of her leaning over his children with a tenderness that carved through his numbness, the kind of care he once thought he would share with his wife. Something in his fortress heart shifted uneasily. Amina whispered to the sleeping babies, unaware of the gaze behind her. "Good night, little angels. Be kind, and the world will one day be kind back to you." Her voice cracked slightly, a sign of tiredness that no one ever asked about. Then she slipped out of the room, anxiety and hope tangled inside her chest as she thought of Marcus again, the small promise of warmth she longed for after countless nights spent alone. And as she disappeared into the dim hallway, Ethan stood still in the shadows, uncertain why he couldn't step away, unable to explain why a nanny's whispered blessing felt more meaningful than the boardroom accolades and empty condolences that filled his days. Outside, the wind brushed against the mansion walls, carrying a subtle omen. This night would not go as planned. Hearts would break, illusions would shatter, and truths no one expected would rise like dawn after a storm. But for now, the world remained quiet, suspended in the fragile peace before everything changed. Amina slipped into the small staff room, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the quiet space. She looked at her reflection in the small wall mirror, eyes ringed with fatigue, hair neatly tied back, the faintest trace of hope lingering in her gaze. Hope could be dangerous, she knew. It could pull you forward, or remind you how far you still were from the life you dreamed of. Her phone buzzed again, and she reached for it as though reaching for a lifeline. "Marcus, wear something cute. Tonight's special." Her lips parted into a shy smile, the kind reserved for moments people rarely witnessed. Not because she lacked beauty, but because she rarely allowed herself to feel desired. Her world revolved around caregiving, feeding, soothing, organizing, lifting, staying composed. To be wanted was still a foreign language, awkward on her tongue, yet comforting in ways she didn't fully understand. She typed back slowly. "Just finishing here. I'll message when I can leave." She hesitated before hitting send, her chest twisting, with the quiet guilt that always came before a moment meant for herself. Women like her, immigrants, caretakers, unnoticed pillars holding up the households of the wealthy, often believed that rest was indulgence, that love was something earned through exhaustion, not given freely, that they were allowed to be strong but not tired, nurturing but not in need. She tucked the phone away, placed her hand on her heart, and closed her eyes. Just one night of joy, she told herself. One night to feel human again. Downstairs, the hallway was dim and golden, shadows stretching long against the polished floor. The house was silent, except for a distant ticking clock, a reminder that time moved on regardless of who broke, who healed, who stayed invisible. From the staircase above, Ethan's footsteps echoed faintly. For a moment, she sensed movement, but when she turned, no one was there, just stillness and the heavy feeling of unseen eyes. A low unease tugged at her ribs, but she brushed it off. Wealthy homes always felt haunted to her, not by spirits, but by unsaid things, past grief, trapped memories. She'd worked in enough. Mansions to know loneliness often echoed loudest in the grandest spaces. She walked toward the twins' room once more, habit pulling her feet forward. They slept peacefully, tiny bodies rising and falling in perfect rhythm, cheeks round and soft under the glow of the night lamp. She pressed a hand to the doorframe, a silent guardian in the half-light, and whispered a promise into the air, more to herself than to them. "You are loved. You will always be loved." She didn't realize Ethan stood farther down the hall, out of sight, watching her again with something different in his eyes this time. Not suspicion, not cold detachment, but a flicker of recognition. The man feels when witnessing faith in a world he abandoned long ago. Amina finally stepped away, heart fluttering with anticipation for the night to come. Marcus, warmth, a moment for herself. She didn't notice the faint red light blinking from a camera tucked discreetly into the corner, capturing every motion. Nor did she see the way Ethan's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in the quiet fear of trust being tested once again. Outside, clouds shifted, swallowing the moon in heavy grey. The air thickened, and somewhere inside the mansion, a soft whimper rose from one of the twins, a tiny warning from fate before the storm. Tonight would feel like freedom, until it didn't. Tonight would promise tenderness before revealing truth. And Amina, hopeful and aching, walked unknowingly toward a night poised to break hearts and rebuild lives. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows as Ethan stood in his dim office, staring at nothing and everything at once. The mansion felt like a museum of memories. The expensive art, the untouched grand piano, the dark shelves filled with leather-bound books he once loved. All symbols of a life that used to mean something. All reminders of the emptiness that followed. He loosened his tie with restless fingers, the silk slipping through his grip. Another day spent smiling in conference rooms, answering calls, shaking hands, performing the role of a man who had control. A man who didn't wake at night choking on grief. A man who didn't replay the moment he lost the woman who was supposed to grow old beside him. He pressed his hand against the glass, palm flat, as if the cold surface could somehow steady the anger and sorrow swirling inside him. The weight of guilt settled like stone on his chest, the same weight that visited every night. He had been in Tokyo when the call came, complications, emergency surgery. She didn't make it. He hadn't heard the doctor finish. His phone had slipped from his fingers and shattered. Just like his life. His twins had entered the world the same day their mother left it. A cruel exchange, a punishment. Sometimes he wondered, sometimes he believed it. The world had taken from him, and in his darkest moments he resented the tiny lives who needed him most. Not because he didn't love them, but because their existence reminded him of what he lost. He sank into his leather chair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands, his breathing strained. The therapist called it grief. He called it drowning. Then he heard a soft sound through the baby monitor, a small whimper, then a tiny sob. Naomi. She was always the sensitive one. He closed his eyes, torn between instinct and fear. He wasn't good at comforting his own children. Every time he tried, they cried harder, as if they sensed the pain behind his arms, the hesitation in his embrace. He reached to turn down the volume, but paused. Through the speakers he heard Amina's soft voice, calm, gentle, wrapped in the warmth he no longer possessed. "Shh, sweetheart, I'm here. Don't worry, my little angel. You're safe. Sleep, my love. No judgment, no frustration, just pure tenderness." He swallowed hard. He envied her. Not her life, her strength, her ability to give love freely, even when life had given her so little comfort. He didn't know her story, not yet, but he saw her tired eyes. He saw the way her shoulders drooped when she thought no one was watching. He saw resilience born from struggle, not privilege. How does someone who has so little still manage to give so much? Ethan stood and moved toward the door, drawn by a quiet pull he couldn't explain. As he reached the hallway, he saw her through the glass railing on the second floor. Amina rocked Naomi gently, humming a lullaby from a land far from this mansion. Her eyes were soft, maternal, sacred, not hired, not obligated, present, connected, loving. And suddenly he feared losing her. Not romantically, he was nowhere near whole enough for that, but as the fragile bridge between him and his children, between him and hope. His phone vibrated in his hand, snapping him back to the present. A security alert. His automated system had flagged motion outside near the side entry gate. He tapped to open the camera feed. A man leaned casually against the fence, checking his phone, hoodie pulled up, smirking at whatever flashed across his screen. Waiting, confident, like he belonged nowhere near a house like this, but expected to be let in. Another vibration. "Marcus, on my way. Hope you're ready for me." Ethan's eyes narrowed. The message wasn't his. It was a preview from Amina's phone, blinking across the connected Nanny cam interface. His pulse kicked, his jaw locked, so she was planning something, a night out, a secret meeting, leaving the twins alone. Anger mixed with fear, confusion, betrayal, not just for his children, but for the fragile trust he didn't realize he had begun to give her. He watched the feed again, the man glancing around, impatient, tapping messages. Ethan's breath turned sharp as the realization formed like ice. This was not just any visitor. This was someone she wanted here, tonight, in his home, while his children slept. Ethan's hand curled into a fist as the storm outside cracked with thunder, echoing the one rising inside him. Something was coming, something that would test loyalty, trust, and truth. Amina didn't know it yet. Marcus didn't care to know. And Ethan, torn between pain and instinct, had just stepped silently into a night that would change all three of them forever. For the first time since his wife died, he felt something powerful. Not grief, not numbness, but the unfamiliar burn of protectiveness rising like fire in his chest. And fate, waiting patiently in the shadows, had just taken its first step toward unraveling every hidden truth. The storm pressed heavier against the world as the night deepened, and every clock inside the mansion seemed to tick louder, marking time like a warning. Amina stood in front of the small mirror again, brushing her curls gently, trying to smooth away the fatigue etched into her features. She changed into a soft pastel sweater she kept folded at the bottom of her bag, modest, warm, but still making her feel feminine for once, instead of simply functional. Tonight she wanted to feel like herself, not just the caretaker, not just the help, not the invisible woman who carried everyone else's needs on her tired shoulders. She smoothed the fabric nervously and whispered to her reflection, "Just a couple of hours, just one night." It was not defiance, it was longing. It was the voice of a woman who had spent too long being strong without rest, patient without comfort, good without reward. One night wouldn't make her irresponsible. One night wouldn't erase all she had given. That's what she told herself over and over, because guilt was already curling inside her like smoke. The hallway outside was dark and quiet as she slipped out of the staff room. She tiptoed toward the back staircase, shoes silent on the carpet, heart thudding with a mixture of excitement and shame. Every step felt like stepping out of a role she was not sure she was allowed to abandon, even briefly. But loneliness had teeth, and tonight she was tired of being bitten. Halfway down the stairs, she paused. A soft cry floated through the corridor, faint, hesitant. "Naomi again." Amina closed her eyes, torn instantly. The world expected women like her to sacrifice always, endlessly, without pause. Careers, families, billionaires, they all leaned on nannies like her to fill the spaces they themselves could not fill. And she always had, but tonight, just tonight, she hesitated. Her hand gripped the railing hard, torn between duty and the aching need to feel chosen just once for herself. Not for what she could provide. She took one deep breath, preparing to continue down the stairs, and then she turned back. One more check. Just one. Then she could go without guilt. She pushed the nursery door open an inch. Naomi lay with her tiny fist curled beneath her cheek, whimpering lightly in her sleep. Amina stepped inside, touched the little girl's back gently, humming a half-sentence of her lullaby. Within seconds, Naomi settled, but then something unexpected. She whispered as she stroked the child's hair, voice trembling without meaning to. "I'm sorry, baby girl. Just a little time for myself. I promise I won't be long." The twins, in their innocence, slept on. They did not know promises or exhaustion or sacrifice. They only knew love, and she gave it freely always. Amina wiped a tear she didn't realize had fallen, kissed both foreheads softly, and slipped out again. Unaware, a camera in the corner caught her every word. Ethan watched from his office, breath tight, emotion warring inside him. He saw her hesitation, her tenderness, her struggle, and it shook him. He had expected betrayal. Instead, he saw humanity and heartbreak. Downstairs, Amina unlocked the back door quietly, whispering to herself, "Just a moment." Just a little bit of joy. Outside, Marcus shifted eagerly, unaware of the invisible storm already swirling inside the house. The storm of a billionaire's wounded heart, a nanny's fragile hope, and the delicate trust that hung by a single trembling thread. Lightning flashed. The latch clicked. Vate exhaled. What entered tonight would not simply be a man. It would be a test of loyalty, of dignity, of love, and of who truly stood on the side of truth when no one was watching. And upstairs, Ethan's pulse quickened. The moment Amina opened that door, nothing in this quiet mansion would ever remain silent again. The rain fell harder now, drumming against the roof like restless fingers tapping out fate's rhythm. Amina opened the back door slowly, letting a sliver of night air brush against her skin. cold damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and something heavier, anticipation. Marcus stood just a few steps away, leaning under the stone archway to stay dry. His hood was still up, face partially shaded, but the smirk he wore shone through like oil on water. "Took you long enough," he murmured, stepping forward, hands slipping to her waist before she could fully close the door behind her. His touch was familiar, playful, and yet something inside her flinched, not from him, but from the guilt that followed her like a shadow. She forced a soft laugh anyway, not wanting feelings to ruin the night she promised herself. "Shh," she whispered, pressing a finger to his lips. "The babies are sleeping. Let them sleep," Marcus said casually, brushing a curl from her forehead. "You deserve to breathe a little, right?" Her heart stuttered. Yes, she deserved to breathe. But why did the reminder make her feel like she was stealing oxygen from someone else? She hadn't realized that upstairs, behind a wall of screens, Ethan Hale stood rigid, fists tight, jaw clenched, eyes dark with emotion he couldn't define. He watched the camera feed with the stillness of a man reliving betrayal, not logically, but viscerally. He saw Marcus's hands on her waist, saw her smile, weary yet soft, and something inside him twisted painfully, like a bruise pressed too hard. His thoughts raced but collided into each other like frantic birds inside a cage. Was she leaving his children asleep and unattended? Had she planned this all along, or was she simply human, desperate for a moment of gentleness in a life that had offered her so little kindness? He didn't know which truth hurt more. Downstairs, Amina took Marcus's hand and led him quietly into the small back passageway, a staff corridor that few used at night. She wanted privacy, not scandal. She wasn't reckless. She was tired. And loneliness had a way of bending even the most disciplined souls. Marcus pulled her into his chest, whispering, "Let's go to your room. You've been ignoring me too much lately." "I haven't," she replied softly. I have responsibilities here." He chuckled, not sweet, not understanding, but annoyed, like responsibility was an inconvenience rather than a virtue. "You care too much about those kids. They aren't yours," her breath caught. Naomi's tiny cry, Noah's sleepy hand grasping her fingers. Their mother she never met, yet felt the echo of. Amina whispered, almost to herself, "Sometimes children choose you." Marcus didn't hear the weight of those words. He only heard delay. He only cared about the time he waited, not the life she lived. Upstairs, Ethan closed his eyes briefly, not in anger now, but in a hollow, aching recognition. Because once someone had said something similar to him. His late wife, smiling through her pregnancy glow, had whispered, as her hand rested on her rounded stomach, "We don't choose our children, Ethan. They arrive already belonging to our hearts." The memory cracked him open all over again. He snapped the laptop shut, unable to watch another second, not because she betrayed him, but because he didn't know how to process the emotions clawing at him. Fear for his children, fear of abandonment, a shameful pang of jealousy wrapped in grief, and underneath it, a hollow realization. The twins were safer in Amina's arms than they ever were in his. Ethan stood abruptly, breath sharp, heart pounding. He made his way silently toward the back stairs, driven not by rage, but by something raw and primal, the terror of losing the one person who held the fragile connection between him and his children's laughter. Meanwhile, in that quiet corridor, Amina leaned into Marcus's shoulder, not with passion, but with quiet sadness. His presence was a bandage, not comfort. His arms, though warm, felt strangely hollow. Her conscience whispered. Her exhaustion fought back. Her heart trembled between desperation and duty. Then from upstairs, a sudden wail tore through the silence, sharp, frightened, unmistakable. Naomi's cry, loud, urgent, heartbreakingly real. Amina froze. Marcus sighed with irritation. Ethan stopped mid-stare, blood rushing cold. The fragile line snapped. The night shifted. The truth, long suppressed, demanded to be seen. In that single cry, that tiny voice piercing the still mansion, every illusion shattered, a mother spirit awakened in Amina's chest. A father's instinct surged through Ethan's frozen heart. A selfish man scowled, realizing he wasn't first in someone's world, and fate, watching from the shadows, whispered softly, "This is the night everything changes." Naomi's cry rang out again, sharper this time, trembling through the quiet mansion like a crack of lightning splitting the night open. Amina's heart jolted, instinct pulling her body before thought could catch up. Without a word, she stepped back from Marcus, pulse racing, breath catching in her throat. It didn't matter what she planned, what she hoped for, or how desperately she wished to feel loved. Those children were woven into her heartbeat. Their fear, their tears, their smallest sound had the power to command her soul. Marcus grabbed her wrist, brows tightening. "Hey, what are you doing? Let her cry. It's 1 minute." Amina stared at him as if she were seeing someone she had once known but never truly understood. His grip felt wrong, his tone jarring. She pulled her hand free, voice low but trembling with something deeper than exhaustion. "She's scared," she whispered. "I know that cry." He rolled his eyes, scoffing. "She's a baby," they cry. "You're not their mother." The words hit harder than intended, not because they were cruel, but because they revealed a truth she'd been avoiding. She might not have given birth to them, but those children had become braided into her heart, as if they were carved there by God himself. Some bonds weren't written in blood. They were formed in late nights and soft songs, in gentle hands and steady presence, in sacrifices no one saw and love given without asking anything in return. She turned away. She didn't need to explain motherhood to a man who understood nothing about love unless it served his needs. The hallway lights flickered faintly from the storm outside as she hurried up the staircase. Her steps light but urgent. Naomi's cries echoed through the top floor now, louder, frantic. Noah stirred too, whimpering in confusion. Thunder boomed beyond the windows, and lightning flashed white against the glass, throwing shadows like ghosts across the nursery walls. Amina rushed inside and lifted Naomi from the crib, gathering the trembling child close. "Shh, I'm here, little one. I'm here." Her voice cracked, raw with guilt and devotion tangled together. Noah reached his tiny hand toward her, and she placed a comforting palm on his chest. Humming through tears she didn't mean to shed. Naomi's cries softened as she clung to Amina's neck, burrowing her small face into the safe place she knew. Down the hall, unseen, Ethan stood frozen as he watched. He had followed the sound too, breath caught, heart pounding, not from anger now, but from a painful clarity settling inside him like dust after a storm. He had expected abandonment. Instead, he found devotion. He had braced himself to witness neglect. Instead, he saw love deep enough to drown in. Amina swayed softly, whispering comfort, her tears dampening Naomi's curls. She whispered apologies that only God and the children could hear. "I'm so sorry, Angel. Mama's here. Mama's here. Just don't cry. Please don't cry." Ethan inhaled sharply at the word Mama. It didn't hurt. Strangely, it didn't hurt at all. Instead, warmth bloomed through the cold iron wrapped around his heart. The twins had already chosen her. In their tiny world, she was safety. She was comfort. She was home. Behind him, footsteps echoed. Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, impatience written on his face like a stain. He didn't lower his voice, careless, indifferent, irritated. "This is ridiculous." "Amina, they're not." The sound of Ethan's voice cut through him like steel. "You say one more word." Marcus turned, startled. Ethan stood there, no longer the quiet, grieving father or the cold billionaire. There was command in his posture, fire in his eyes, and storm in his silence. Marcus scoffed, unaware he was already sinking. "I'm talking to my girlfriend." "Stay out of—" Ethan stepped forward, voice low and lethal with controlled fury. "That woman has given more love in this house than you have given in your entire life." The words hung thick in the air, charged, electrified. Marcus blinked, stunned by the authority in Ethan's tone, by the truth in it, even if he refused to accept it. Amina kept her gaze on Naomi, not turning yet, not wanting to face what she knew waited behind her. Shame, fear, responsibility, truth, all opening their hands at once, demanding she choose who she really was. The storm outside roared, but inside a different storm had arrived. Quiet, intimate, dangerous. 3 lives had collided in one fragile hallway. One heart was breaking, one heart was awakening, and one heart had just shown its true emptiness, and the night, heavy with fate, had only just begun to reveal who truly belonged in this home, and who never did. Marcus let out a short, mocking laugh, the kind that exposed arrogance more than confidence. "You're really going to lecture me about love? You don't even take care of your own kids. You pay other people to do it." The hallway air thickened, charged, dangerous. Amina stiffened, her heart slamming against her ribs. Noah whimpered louder now, feeling the tension in the air. Naomi clutched Amina tighter, her tiny fingers digging into her shoulder as if sensing danger too. Ethan's eyes darkened, not with rage, but with wounded pride and an old grief dragged suddenly into the harsh light. He took a slow step forward, jaw carved like stone. "You don't know me," Ethan said, voice low, steady, but trembling with restrained hurt. "And you know nothing about loss." Marcus folded his arms, unbothered. "I know weakness when I see it. You let your money do the work. And he jabbed a finger toward Amina, who held the children protectively. "She's too desperate to say no to you. That's the only reason she's here." The words cut like knives, sharp, careless, cruel. Amina flinched, tears splashing silently onto Naomi's temple. She wasn't weak. She wasn't desperate. She worked because she had to. She loved because her heart demanded it. But men like Marcus didn't see the battles of women who gave without applause. They saw convenience. They saw someone to lean on, but not stand beside. Ethan's expression shifted, grief fading, something harder replacing it. Gone was the quiet, guilt-ridden widower. Standing in his place was a man who had clawed his way through life and loss, who had endured whispers and pity and loneliness. A man rediscovering his spine, and the children who depended on it. "You should leave," Ethan said, voice deepening like thunder rolling over mountains. Marcus scoffed. "Relax, she's coming with me." "She's not your property." Amina stiffened. She felt the weight of those words. Chains formed not by metal, but by misunderstanding. She wasn't property. She wasn't a possession to be claimed by love or employment or circumstance. But tonight, she felt caught between 2 worlds, neither one easy, both demanding her loyalty. She lifted her chin slowly, voice shaking but steady enough to be heard. "Marcus, go, please." For a second he looked confused, like he hadn't expected her to speak first. Then annoyance twisted his features. "Amina, don't start. You promised tonight was—" "I didn't promise to abandon children crying in the dark," she whispered, rocking Naomi gently. "And I didn't promise to choose you over what is right," Marcus sneered. "So that's it? I wait outside like a fool while you play nanny forever. You think this rich family will save you? They don't care about you." His words were venom, but they exposed his insecurity, not her worth. Amina finally looked up, tears tracking down her cheeks. "I don't need saving. I just need peace." And the truth struck him harder than any insult could. He wasn't offering peace. He was offering escape built on selfishness. Marcus stepped toward her again, frustrated, reaching as if to pull her away, but Ethan moved faster. "No!" Ethan's voice cracked through the space, like a command from a man who had finally awakened. "You don't touch her, not here. Not ever." Marcus froze as Ethan squared his shoulders between him and Amina, an unspoken line drawn in marble and blood and broken memories. "Security is on their way," Ethan said coldly. "Walk out on your own feet or they will drag you." For the first time, fear flickered in Marcus's eyes. He looked at Amina, then at Ethan, realizing the balance of power had shifted. Not because of money, but because Amina's heart had just chosen dignity over desperation. He backed away slowly, hate simmering. "This isn't over." Amina didn't respond. She only held the children closer, whispering soft comfort. Ethan didn't flinch. He watched Marcus descend the stairs and disappear into the storm outside. Silence fell again, heavy, Trembling sacred, Amina stood in the dim corridor, chest rising and falling in shaky breaths. Two small lives wrapped in her arms, and Ethan. He stood beside her, not touching, not speaking, but present in a way he hadn't been for anyone in years. They didn't look at each other yet. They didn't speak their apologies. They didn't name the moment, but something had shifted quietly, profoundly. Tonight had threatened to break them. Instead, it revealed who they truly were. Two wounded souls, two innocent children, one fragile bond forged in tears, and the beginning of something neither had expected: respect, responsibility, awakening. Outside, the storm began to calm. Inside, a different storm was just beginning to transform into something gentler, something that looked suspiciously like hope. The storm outside tapered into a steady drizzle, the sound soft like a tired sigh from the night itself. Inside, the mansion fell into a heavy quiet, broken only by Naomi's hiccuped breaths and Noah's soft whimpers. Amina moved deeper into the nursery, holding Naomi close while reaching her free hand toward Noah, her thumb smoothing gentle circles over his tiny palm. They responded instantly, bodies relaxing, breath slowing. Their small frames trusted her instinctively, unquestioningly. Ethan followed at a slower pace, as if afraid any sudden movement might fracture the moment. He stood by the doorway, shoulders tense, hands hanging uselessly at his sides. It felt wrong to enter, as though he were trespassing in a room now ruled by warmth he couldn't claim. The soft nightlight illuminated his face, no longer angry, just lost and strangely vulnerable, like a man standing in front of a wound he had spent years pretending did not exist. Amina didn't look at him. Not yet. She didn't have the strength to face his judgment, nor the self-defense left in her to explain her weakness. Her heart still felt bruised from Marcus's words, from almost walking away, from the way guilt now clawed at her stomach like a wild thing desperate for escape. She whispered love into the children's hair, letting her tears fall silently, letting the world shrink to the size of two sleeping souls, and one impossible responsibility she had nearly failed, even if just for a moment. She rocked Naomi slowly, humming that familiar lullaby, voice wavering but still carrying tenderness that wrapped the children like a warm blanket. Ethan swallowed hard. The sound of her song, so fragile yet strong, pricked a place inside him he thought had dried long ago. He stepped forward, not close enough to intrude, but close enough to let her know he hadn't walked away. His voice was low, cautious, and unsure, as if he had to relearn speech for moments that mattered. "You didn't have to come back." Amina stiffened, not because the words were harsh, but because they were the opposite. She didn't expect gentleness from him. Not now. Maybe not ever. She kept her gaze on the twins. "I did," Ethan hesitated. "You didn't owe me—" "I didn't come back for you." Her voice cracked softly. "I came back for them." Silence again. Not bitter, just honest. He looked down, jaw tightening, as if ashamed that he had needed that reminder. He wasn't the center of this moment. The children were, and tonight had revealed what he feared most. He was not their sanctuary. She was, Amina. He spoke her name, like someone discovering a fragile object they weren't sure how to hold. "I misjudged the situation. He swallowed. "I misjudged you." She didn't answer. She didn't trust her voice not to break. She just kept humming, rocking Naomi gently, while Noah clutched her finger like the world depended on it. Ethan moved closer to Noah's crib, stopping inches from her side. He reached out, as if to touch Noah's shoulder, hesitated, then let his hand fall again. The distance between his fingers and his child felt like a canyon. "I didn't know how to help," he admitted quietly, staring at his own child as though he were looking at a stranger. "They cry when I hold them." "They stop when you do." Amina finally turned slightly, enough to see him from the corner of her eye. "They feel your pain," she whispered. "Babies always sense the heart first, not the hands." The sentence hit him like truth etched in marble. He blinked hard, fighting the sting of tears he didn't expect. He had spent months thinking he was failing as a father because he was incapable of soothing them, never realizing the grief he carried seeped from him like cold air. chilling those closest to him. "And what about you?" she asked softly, tremor in her voice. "Who senses your pain?" He didn't answer because he didn't know how, because no one had asked him that since the day he buried his wife, because vulnerability was a language he had forgotten. Amina lowered Naomi gently back into the crib, smoothing a blanket over her. She placed Noah's hand beside his sister's and watched as he instinctively reached for her, even in sleep. Their little fingers intertwined, a silent promise of comfort, neither fully understood, but both needed desperately. Only then did she straighten, wiping her cheeks discreetly. Ethan stood still, watching her like a man witnessing something sacred. "You don't have to explain what happened tonight," he said quietly. "But I want you to know, I saw you. I saw who you really are." Her chin trembled. "And who is that?" "A woman who cares more than most people ever will," he murmured. "A woman my children trust more than they trust me." It wasn't a compliment. It was a confession. Her breath caught. The weight of his sincerity pressed on her chest, like both comfort and ache. She wanted to respond, but before words could form, a small sound escaped Naomi, a gentle whine. Amina lifted her hand again, resting it lightly on the crib railing, and the baby calmed. Ethan watched the motion with awe and defeat woven together. "Amina, why didn't you leave?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She finally looked at him fully, eyes tired, red, aching with truth. "Because love doesn't clock out," she whispered, "even when the heart is tired." And Ethan, a man built from steel and silence, felt something break inside him. Quietly, painfully, liberatingly. Not anger, not jealousy, not judgment, gratitude, humility, and the haunting realization that tonight she saved more than the children. She may have saved him too, by reminding him that love, real love, was not perfect or convenient or timed. It was chosen, and tonight she chose the children over herself. In that quiet nursery, under the soft hum of the nightlight and the gentle breaths of sleeping twins, something shifted forever between them. Not romance, not yet, but respect deep as roots. A father began waking up. A woman reclaimed her worth. Two children slept safely between the two hearts, learning how to feel again, and though neither knew it, tonight was not the end of a mistake. It was the beginning of redemption. The nursery settled into a hushed stillness, the fragile quiet of a world slowly stitching itself back together. Naomi's breathing steadied, soft and rhythmic. Little fingers still curled around her brother's. Noah sighed in his sleep, and the sight of their small hands intertwined felt like a prayer, a simple, unspoken truth about human need and connection. Amina's own breath trembled as she exhaled, her hands lightly resting on the crib railing. For a moment, she let herself simply feel the weight of the moment, the near mistake, the pull of loneliness, the relief of choosing right, even when no one was watching. That was love too, not the sweet, easy kind, but the kind forged in sacrifice, duty, and silent battles fought in tired hearts. Behind her, Ethan stood with his shoulders lowered, the edges of his sorrow exposed in the dim light. He looked at her like he was seeing a person and not a role for the first time, as though the armor he wore, grief-polished, icy, impenetrable, had cracked just enough to let truth seep through. He stepped closer, slowly, like approaching a fragile memory. When he spoke, his voice came heavy, weighted with things he had not said in a long time. "I owe you an apology." Amina didn't turn yet. Apologies from the powerful always came heavy, always came too late, and always carried the weight of things that could never be undone. She swallowed, pressing fingertips into the wood beneath them. "You don't owe me anything," she murmured, though her voice held sadness. Not dismissal. Ethan shook his head, the movement small but firm. "I owe you respect." "And I've given you suspicion instead." Amina closed her eyes. Those words hit deeper than he knew. Suspicion, it was the shadow that followed women like her everywhere. Dark-skinned, immigrant, caregiver. Society trusted their labor, their hands, their nurturing, but rarely trusted them. There was always a silent question lurking behind polite smiles. Are you good enough? Honest enough? Safe enough? She turned then, not defensive, but dignified. Mr. Hale, trust is earned. I understand that, his gaze held hers. You earned it a long time ago, I just didn't know how to see it. And there, for the first time in years, Ethan Hale looked ashamed not of what he lost, but of who grief had turned him into. A man who watched instead of helped. A father who froze instead of held. A human who forgot others had hearts too. His voice softened, cracking like thin ice. You didn't walk away tonight. Even when you had every right to want something for yourself. Amina felt tears sting again, but she blinked them back. Wanting isn't wrong, she whispered. It's just, sometimes life teaches us that what we want doesn't matter as much as what we need to protect. He studied her, something reverent settling on his features. And what do you need, Amina? It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't pity. It was a question asked by a man who finally understood that the people who held his world together had worlds of their own. She didn't have to think long. Her voice came soft but strong, truth-worn, smooth by years of quiet endurance, rest, respect, and to not always be the one holding everything together while feeling like I'm falling apart inside. The words landed like confession and witness all at once. Ethan's throat tightened. Pain flickered in his eyes, the pain of recognizing someone else's struggle and realizing he too had lived inside that same heaviness. But with the privilege to hide it behind power, he nodded slowly. I can't change your whole life, but I can try to change the part of it that happens in this house. Amina didn't move, didn't breathe for a moment. Promises from men with power were dangerous things they could lift or destroy. What do you mean? She asked quietly. His jaw worked, emotion flickering like a fragile flame. But Amina didn't flinch. She looked at him, at the broken boy inside the angry man, and replied quietly, they already did. Those babies chose me the day they stopped crying in my arms, and nothing you say can take that from me. Marcus faltered, then turned away into the rain, shrinking with each step until darkness swallowed him. The door shut, silence returned, real, full, sacred. Amina trembled, leaning slightly against the wall as if finally feeling every ounce of the night. Ethan stepped closer, not touching but offering presence like a shield. You didn't deserve his words, he said softly. Or his doubt, she exhaled shakily. Painful words don't define me. My choices do. He nodded slowly, humbled. And tonight you chose love, even at your own expense. A tear escaped her eye, not from weakness, but from the weight of being seen, finally seen. Ethan hesitated, then offered quietly, you don't have to be strong alone anymore. Not here. Amina looked at him, tired but proud, wounded but standing. Then learn to be strong with me, she whispered. For them, and for yourself. In the quiet foyer, beneath chandeliers and storm-light shadows, they didn't touch. They didn't need to. Something more intimate happened instead. A mutual vow in silence, a shared awakening, and the first fragile spark of a new beginning. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. Inside, two lives began shifting from survival to something dangerously close to healing. A hush lingered through the mansion, as if the walls themselves were exhaling after holding tension far too long. Rain softened outside, fading into misty breaths against the windows. The crisis had passed, but now came the emotional aftershock. The quiet unraveling inside two hearts that had been forced to face truths neither wanted to see. Amina stood near the staircase, one hand resting gently on the railing, her shoulders trembling. She wasn't crying. She had already shed her tears in silence, in the nursery, in the loneliness of almost choosing emptiness over duty. Now she simply stood as a woman stripped raw, not broken, but exposed, vulnerable in a house too big, too silent, too full of reminders of what she almost risked. Her body felt heavy, like her bones carried the weight of every sacrifice she'd ever made. The night had tested her spirit, pulled at the quiet places where exhaustion and longing lived. And though she had stayed strong, though she had chosen love over loneliness, duty over desperation, the cost pulsed through her veins like an ache. Behind her, Ethan watched her from a few steps away. He didn't move, didn't interrupt. Something instinctual told him that strength didn't always need saving. Sometimes it needed witnessing. He had spent so long expecting people to endure silently. Now he realized endurance didn't mean invincibility. It meant someone carried storms alone. No more, he told himself. Not in this house. Not for her. He stepped forward, slow and careful, like approaching a wounded bird still determined to fly. "Sit," he whispered. "Please." Amina hesitated, then nodded, sinking onto the upholstered bench in the foyer. She clasped her hands in her lap, staring at them, breath shaky. Ethan sat nearby, not too close, not imposing, but present, human, unarmored. For a long moment, neither spoke. Silence didn't feel awkward, not tonight. It felt like truth, like honesty stripped of performance. Eventually, Ethan found his voice, quiet and thoughtful. "I never understood what they meant when people said grief makes you blind," he murmured. "I thought it just made you sad. But now I see it makes you forget how to see others at all." Amina looked up slowly, eyes soft, tired. "Pain turns inward. It makes the world small. Sometimes so small you think you're the only one inside it." He nodded painfully. "I shut everyone out, even my children. And they never asked for any of it." Amina's gaze softened further. "Grief is heavy, but love is heavier, and you're carrying both." Ethan's jaw tightened, emotions knotting in his throat. "You carried the weight with me, without ever asking for recognition." She looked away, blinking hard. "Children don't understand patience or absence. They only understand presence. So I gave them all I had, and I saw that as duty," he whispered. "Not devotion." Amina's hands folded tighter, fingers interlacing like she was holding herself together. "I forgot myself tonight. That frightens me more than anything. I almost left them, even for a moment. That's not something I can forgive myself easily for." Ethan leaned closer, voice gentle but firm. "That moment does not define you. Your return does." Amina squeezed her eyes shut, emotion rippling through her. "Sometimes the world teaches us we're only good when we don't need rest, when we give everything and ask for nothing. And that's wrong," Ethan said, voice sharpened by conviction. "You are allowed to be tired, allowed to want, allowed to be held up, not always holding." She inhaled shakily. "It doesn't feel that way." "It will," he said simply, "because I'm going to make sure it does. The twins aren't just learning to trust me again, I'm learning to trust myself again. And I want to earn your trust too. Not because I employ you, but because I respect you." Her breath hitched. She didn't look at him yet. She didn't need to. His words had already reached the bruised, weary corners of her heart. "I've never had anyone stand for me like that," she whispered. "Not really. You stood for me first," he replied softly. "When I didn't even realize I needed someone." A silence settled again, warmer now. A moment where two broken souls sat side by side, recognizing one another's fractures, not as weaknesses, but as evidence of survival. A soft cry echoed faintly upstairs, just a sleepy stir. Nothing urgent. Amina instinctively moved to rise, but Ethan touched her arm lightly, not restraining, merely reassuring. "I'll check," he whispered. "Rest, just breathe." She nodded, and Ethan stood, walking toward the stairs. But before he climbed, he paused and turned back. "Amina," he murmured, "you didn't fail tonight. You proved who you truly are, finally." She lifted her eyes to his, exhausted, teary, but filled with strength forged through fire. "And so did you," she whispered. He held her gaze a second longer, long enough for something unspoken to pass. Fragile but real, then disappeared up the staircase. Amina leaned back against the bench cushion, chest rising slowly, breath finally steadying. She closed her eyes, allowing herself for the first time in a long time to simply exist without carrying everything at once. Tonight, she had nearly broken. But tonight, she also learned she did not have to survive alone anymore, and in the quiet space between exhaustion and hope, dignity settled over her like a blanket, wrapping her in the truth she had earned. She was not just the help. She was not invisible. She was the heart of a home, rediscovering how to feel, and for the first time, someone had finally seen her, not as a servant, not as a sacrifice, but as a woman worthy of rest, respect, and protection. Morning was coming soon, and it would not arrive to find the same house it left behind. The sky outside had begun to pale, a faint wash of lavender and silver touching the edges of the night. The mansion was quiet, not the cold, hollow quiet of before, but a resting quiet, as though the house itself finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. Upstairs, Ethan moved softly through the nursery, checking the twins. They slept peacefully now, tiny fists curled, breathing deep in the safety of dawn. He brushed a gentle hand over Naomi's blanket, marveling at how much peace such small beings could bring, even when they cried, even when they needed. That was the truth he had forgotten. Love was not a burden, it was a calling. A quieter truth followed right behind it. He had been afraid to answer that call. Tonight, he had taken the first step toward answering it again. Downstairs, Amina rested her head back against the bench cushion, eyes half closed, exhaustion wrapping around her bones like a heavy shawl. But the heaviness felt different now, not despair, not depletion. Just the natural ache that follows a battle fought with heart and conscience. Her phone vibrated once beside her, Marcus's name flashing briefly before the screen dimmed. She didn't reach for it. She didn't owe answers to a man who confused possession with affection, who mistook her endurance for dependency. Tonight had shown her the difference between being wanted and being valued. And God, what a difference it was. A soft sound of footsteps approached, and she lifted her head slightly as Ethan returned, walking down the stairs slowly. Not in command, not in control, just present, human. "They're asleep," he said gently. Amina nodded. Good. He hesitated, as though wanting to sit beside her but afraid to intrude. She noticed the hesitation, and after a moment she shifted slightly, making space, not an invitation but a quiet allowance. He took it, lowering himself to sit a few inches away. For a long moment they sat in stillness, dawn seeping into the edges of the marble hall, dusting it with soft light. And then Ethan spoke, voice low and raw, as if scraping truth from a place untouched for years. "When my wife died," he said slowly, "I convinced myself the world had taken everything good from me. I thought love was over, that it lived only in memory." Amina listened silently, hands folded, eyes soft. "I hid behind work," he continued, "behind routine, behind numbness. And I told myself I was protecting my children by being strong." A sad smile tugged at his lips. "But I wasn't strong. I was absent." "Grief doesn't make you weak," Amina murmured. "It makes you wounded." He turned toward her, eyes tired but clear. "And tonight, you showed me that healing isn't found in shutting people out. It's found in choosing them." Amina's breath trembled. "We choose with our actions, and tonight you chose love," he said softly. "Even when it hurt," she met his gaze steadily. "And you chose to stand for yourself and for them." For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to feel pride not built from business wins or wealth, but from something far rarer, becoming present again. A soft, warm light began to glow through the windows as the sun finally lifted its head above the horizon. A new day, a clean slate. Ethan exhaled deeply. "I want you to rest today. A full day, paid. And after that," he paused, voice firm, "we're restructuring your schedule. No more double shifts. No more carrying the world alone. You are part of this home, Amina, and that means this home supports you too." Her eyes filled, but these tears felt different, lighter, almost tender. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not gratitude for money, not charity. Gratitude for dignity, for being seen not as a role, but as a person who mattered." A new quiet settled between them, not tense, not painful, just peaceful. The kind that grows only after a storm has passed and the air is finally clean again. Amina leaned her head back, letting her eyes flutter closed. Ethan stood slowly, reluctant to break the moment, and whispered, "Rest, I'll be here with them." She nodded, trusting, truly trusting. Then she let sleep take her, deep, dreamless, earned rest. Ethan looked at her for a moment longer, a soft respect touching his features, then turned toward the stairs. As he walked back to the nursery, The sun spilled fully through the windows, bathing the house in warm gold. The mansion did not feel cold anymore. The shadows were gone. The silence was no longer empty. It was peaceful. And upstairs, two sleeping children waited, not for a nanny or a father trapped in grief, but for a family rediscovering its heart. Tonight had broken illusions, but by dawn, something stronger had been built in their place. Trust, respect, belonging, and the first quiet seeds of redemption. The storm had passed. What grew now would be love, not the romantic, fast-burning kind, but the steady, healing kind born from truth and compassion. And the house that once echoed with silence now breathed with life again.